Natural Movement. I am one of two hosts, Jahlil Karim and my esteemed colleague and friend, Brother Duran Chavis, also known as Brother Manifest. And to recap of on last week, we talked about relationships, which was very taxing. But it was a subject that had to be addressed in a sense where, and it came to us in divine inspiration. So we're going to, we always try to recap about last week so we have a continuity about of our shows. So we talked about relationships, but we're going to go even deeper and talk about culture and what culture encompasses.
Okay.
And now is the time, since it is Black History Month. Shout out to Carter G. Woodson for having that for, starting off a different segment of our culture. So with no delay.
I think we just wanted to touch on some of those concepts of what culture is in our community, and not only that, but we wanted to make sure that people took a moment to understand, like, you know, we're talking about natural lifestyles and we're talking about living, and what encompasses your lifestyle and your behavior other than your culture. What exactly is it that you practice and believe in? What gives meaning to your life? And those are some of the things that culture brings. Before we go into that, I did want to segue or kind of like a tangential point, because it is the first show of Black History Month.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's going on this year? This is the 150th year, the sesquicentennial, which is the 150th anniversary of the Civil War.
Is that like gold and silver or something like that? Like,
no, right?
It's like the platinum.
It's the platinum year. So it's going to be a lot of conversation this year about the 150th year anniversary, and I know personally, I kind of find myself in a lot of social circles where this conversation is taking place.
Yeah.
But I find myself in a lot of other social circles where this conversation is not taking place at all. Yeah. So it's heavy on my heart to be pulled in these two different directions around folks that I care and admire and love dearly, who are not really talking about what the 150th year anniversary is.
Well, how are they even conscious? I mean, you know, for it to come up, someone has to be conscious of that. And as a whole, do you think that we are, as a people, and I don't mean just us as in Black History Month and Black people, mm-hmm. but I think it's a taboo subject of sort.
Yeah, I mean, but we do live in the capital of the Confederacy. I mean, this is Richmond, Virginia. It was the last city to fall during the Civil War. This is also one of the most economically sound places for trafficking African people during the pre-Civil War era. So, you know, those conversations, slavery, Civil War, I mean, it's kind of like, it's important for us to be having that. I mean, this city in particular, Richmond, is marketed as a historical landmark, a place where you can come find out information about the Civil War. I mean, if you go down Monument Avenue, you see dozens of statues, and, you know, go throughout the city, there's almost a great number of the schools and historic places are named after Civil War.
You got Jefferson Davis. Yeah. The street names says it.
Jeb Stewart. These are all Civil
Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, all Civil War generals and officials. So, 150th year anniversary, what does that mean to African American, particularly, and specifically for the intents and purposes of what we're doing here with Natural Movement? What does that mean for us? And overall, what does that mean for this country? So I think that it's important for us to look up these terms, figure out what does it mean as we go into the sesquicentennial. Yeah. I think a lot of the conversations are going to be about what is the meaning of the Civil War. What was it fought over?
I think those who cannot picture the sesquicentennial, that let's go back to the centennial. Yeah. You know, and what was going on then. Right. Sometimes we need a point of reference, and sometimes that point of reference, especially after the technological advances that that as a society or a culture we've came from. We're generations as far as information, maybe not all information,
Right.
but just digital information, not analog, but we went from analog to digital, and that's two separate sides. That's yin and yang
Right.
at its strongest points. And I think that those who can't or those who don't think about the sesquicentennial, 150 years sesquicentennial.
Yeah, it's a funny word.
Yeah, we have to go back, when 50 years when it began in Virginia. So if you live in or wherever you're at, I'm sure that it had its ripple effect with the whole nation, and it was atoning for our rights as a people, as far as voting right, the Voting Act, sit-ins, freedom rides, marches on Washington, Birmingham, Alabama, Selma.
Right.
Those are things that happened 50 years ago. So it's not really, 100 years ago.
Not that long ago.
Yeah, but it's really not that long ago when these big ripples
Right.
have
in our society.
Yeah.
I think that another way to look at it is in terms of generations, because if you look at 50 years being one generation, like you have a grandfather or grandmother possibly that's 50 years removed from you who was an adult during the 60s, and then if you go back 50 years prior to her, then you will have a great grandmother who was alive and living during that period of time. So if you think 100 years past, you think Great Depression, but if you think 50 years past, you think Civil Rights Movement, and you think 150 years past, and you think the Civil War. So if you contrast time, a previous show we talked about history and the importance of history. So kind of putting that in juxtaposition of what we're talking about today with culture, it's important for us to have a unique perspective in terms of what do these landmarks of time, these 50-year increments mean for people of African descent. So I think that one of the things that you had brought with you today, you brought this Style Weekly article that talked about finding meaning in the Civil War. And I think that's a very important discussion, because depending on who's looking at it, you're going to come up with all different types of interpretations as far as the meaning. I put a Facebook status up today as to how many people still believe that the Civil War was fought to free enslaved Africans. And I think pretty much the consensus was that nobody believes that anymore, but I think the Facebook friends I have are a little bit different than the conventional folks. So these are folks that are doing a lot of reading.
That's different demographics.
It's not really
same tax bracket, but different.
It's not really a fair assessment to me for me to think that everybody kind of has come to this understanding that the Civil War truly was not fought on behalf of freedom for African people.
Well, I think personally that sign on a piece of paper doesn't do much. As far as like a red light. There's nothing stopping you from going through that red light except it's red and you just want to go through it. So I mean, I think that's a learned sort of behavior in a sense where it's not as it's more learned than actually natural. Which is some things are supposed to be on that level, but at the same time, we definitely have to realize where we're going from here with that. I mean, it's a touchy subject, and a lot of people, a lot of us, not a lot of people, but a lot of us, and I don't mean black, but just people in general, that kind of live in status quo. Like if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And if you don't know if it's broken, how do you fix it?
That's a good point.
I mean, and just because it doesn't affect me, it doesn't matter. Ignorance is bliss. There's a couple of little innuendos. Something that says that it's okay. And I think that war, like any fight, starts with two sides.
That's true.
There's a two-sided thing, and it's
and then there's the people that's caught in the middle.
The people, and see the middle, you got black and white, but then you have all these shades of gray and light gray and dark gray and light gray and dark gray until it's, that middle. Yeah, it's ambiguous. Like we don't know where it starts, where it ends, and everybody has their perception.
Yeah.
You know, from
For the intents and purposes of what we're talking about, though, you know, I want people to, I hope that people can infer that when I'm talking about the Civil War, when we're talking about the Civil War in terms of social change, especially for improvement of people of African descent, it's important to take an empowered stance. I think that, you know, given the opportunity, had I been during that era of the Civil War, I can only infer, and I can only just imagine, you know, just speculate. But I would only presume that I would be one that would be like, I'm picking up arms to fight for my freedom.
Yeah, especially if you're in the trenches.
Versus state rights or versus, you know, whatever, you know, a bullet point is thrown out there by, you know, modern day academia and scholars for the reasons of the Civil War. I think that it's pretty safe to say that African people, that when they decided to join the Union, they were joining as a form of resistance and rebellion against slavery, and that they were ready to procure their freedom through arms, through militant means.
Well, not only that, but you know, it's taking the side of least resistance per se. And if you know, that's why the whole surrogate family thing, and the North was looking like better parents than the South, versus, you know, and the North didn't have as many people because the North was technologically sound. The Industrial Revolution happened in the North. You know, all that stuff happened in New York, not in New York, but in the North. And you have two ways of thinking, you know, and it's like the chicken or the egg.
True.
You know, and I think that's important, because I don't think the North or the South had any intent to free us as slaves, but you know,
the circumstances provided that this is what had to happen in order to move forward. You know, they kind of were tossed that bone and they had to chew on it. You know,
it's like espionage, warfare. You know, that's you know, it was a decisive blow per se. Also, I think that since the Industrial Revolution and things were moving a bit more progressively, and there was a bit more commerce, you know, and you'll see, like in New York compared to Richmond, Virginia, things are taller. Things are, you know, there's no real natural resource. There's no too many farms in New York. You know, that's not going to happen, you know, in New York.
Okay. Well, you know, we don't want to belabor the point on the Civil War, but just definitely, you know, be on the lookout for the term sesquicentennial. I'm probably messing up the word. I butcher it. I don't use this word.
150 years.
Yeah, the 150-year anniversary, the sesquicentennial. Be on the lookout for that. Look it up, Google it. You know, try to figure out, you know, what programs you want to take your children to, and so they can understand, you know, their today based off of what happened yesterday. And you know, we're not all byproducts of our past, but our past is what makes up our today. So the context that you find yourself in today is a direct result of what happened yesterday. So definitely don't be left out of this conversation on the 150-year anniversary of the Civil War, because it's going to be huge for the state of Virginia, and it's going to be huge for the city of Richmond. And I think, like, probably in the next couple of months, you're going to start seeing a lot of advertisements around that. A lot of tourist things are going to be driven towards the city, so you don't want to be outside of the loop on that. But we need to get on the conversation of culture, and you know, culture. You know, culture is important for any people, you know, but I guess before we get into that conversation, what exactly is culture?
Well, me personally, culture